Welcome to Local Edition. I'm Brad Pomerance in San Diego County. Today, I am so glad that Rocky Chavez is here. He is a member of the California State Assembly. Prior to serving in Sacramento, he had been Undersecretary of Veterans Affairs in the state capitol. He had been a Marine colonel. So we're looking today, sir, at, I'll just call it the debacle surrounding military retention bonuses for the National Guard, including and specifically in California. Let's go back to 2006. What was going on in terms of the Guard in California and retention bonuses?
Yes, as you know, and by 2006 and 2009, when all this broke out, there was a problem of the continuing battle overseas.
Right. Middle East.
And so we needed to have forces to go overseas, and so we needed manpower.
Right.
And so different bonuses are offered to for different skills. And what California started doing at a very high rate, more than any other state in the union, was that we started giving bonuses to people that weren't fully qualified for it or weren't doing the jobs they were responsible for.
And let's really dig into that because, look, on the one hand, those that got bonuses, I believe, shouldn't be penalized because they got what they were given. They didn't do anything nefarious.
I want to be very clear. The young people that did that did nothing wrong.
Right.
These are young people who went in and raised their hand and said, I'm willing to go serve the country. And back then, there were some tough battles. So
right.
They are heroes, and they shouldn't pay a penny back.
So let's
put that in a different group.
Right. So let's go to the...
But the leadership, the general officers and the colonels and the senior staff and COs that were gaming the system to do this, there was a big investigation held for it, and there were a number of colonels that actually relieved and ended their career. The commanding general at the time was called back.
Well, there were criminal charges. There was a guilty plea.
And there were a sergeant first class who they went down and they took care of, and he spent 18 months in jail. But they were the people that they put up, but it was more of a culture of a problem within the California Guard. Now, the current General Baldwin, he came in, he was elevated in there, and he cleaned this up.
He did.
And he did a lot of good things.
But you did mention that people were being brought on for jobs with which they were not prepared, and I want to dig into that because you said it. Back in 2006, the death rate was growing, the carnage was increasing, and so they were having difficulty, the military, bringing on new recruits. So they needed to fill the field with soldiers, and so they incentivized these National Guard who worked 2 days a month. And was it the right thing to do to send folks, giving them a $15,000 bonus to Iraq when they work 2 days a month?
I think the real discussion that the United States needs to deal with, and especially at the highest level, the presidential and the Department of Defense, is to look at a thing called force structure. Mm-hmm. Do we have adequate military to meet the needs that we've established politically? And we've been at a war right now for, 15 years. And the fact that we've been at this war that long, mm-hmm. and we're still engaged in it, and we're using reserves and Guard members to come out to do this, tells me that the active duty force is not structured the way it should be. And the difference between the active duty force, the reserves, and the Guard is not just mission assignment, there's also financial implications to it.
Okay, so let's, for those that are not familiar with military structure, active duty is obvious. Those are full-time staffers. What's the difference between reserves and Guard?
Well, the active duty, as you said, are full-time committed people that serve 724. The reserves are individuals who have come in and they drill every month, and they drill for a couple of days. And they're great people. A lot of young college kids used to go through, so they're great. The Guard are similar, but they are actually state employees, part of the Guard. Unless they're activated, then they go underneath federal responsibility. Because of the requirement that was established with our issues in the Middle East, we didn't have the manpower. And so we started bringing in reserves and Guard to backfill the active duty, right, because the active duty didn't have enough manpower. They're going back to back,
sure,
fighting the battle, so you need more people.
And so those that were getting bonuses, apparently inappropriately, but not to their knowledge, were both reserves and Guard?
What we're dealing with right now in the paper is strictly Guard.
Just the Guard.
But to highlight a point, I have an employee with my own organization, my own staff, and she's a sergeant first class. In the past year, she's been in Honduras. And I was asking her, I said, you're a reservist who is signed on to work every 2 days a month every
Right. Every
and
month.
and you've been activated now for what, 9, 10 months? She's going 11 months.
Right.
And normal reserves aren't assigned to that. And I asked her, so what mission are you filling? Well, she's in the Southern Command. Well, is that an appropriate mission to be assigned by a reservist?
Huh.
The big issue of this story is force structure in the Department of Defense and how we're using people. And the bottom line is this. When you have an active duty person, after they retire in 20 years, you have their retirement for the rest of their lives. When you have a reservist and a guard, they have a different retirement program that comes in much later. So at the bean counter level in Washington, D.C., it's much cheaper to bring in a reserve and guard to do the same mission than it is to use the active duty. That's the real story of this guard issue in California. This is just a pimple of a much greater problem.
Well, let's try to pull back even further and figure out how did this happen and why did it take the LA Times to blow this story open? I mean, print is not dead, I believe. This whole election season, we saw how print was blowing stories up. Why was it a print publication that caused so much attention to it? Was it just hard to put the pieces together?
No, actually, this was something that's been ongoing for some long. There was a series of investigations that we discussed earlier.
Right.
People who had done it had been held accountable. As far as the payment back for the young people, the $10,000
Right.
or $15,000 bonuses, there was a request that was actually brought before. Remember Colonel Cook?
Sure.
Colonel Cook.
Are you talking about Paul Cook, the
Paul Cook.
congressman?
Congressman,
Yeah.
now congressman. He had a bill going forward that
Right.
would have absolved this, but according to the papers which I read,
Right.
he was told by the guard, no, they had this taken care
Right.
of. They were gonna
Jeff
assure-
Denham, the same, Congressman Jeff
ev-
Denham.
So people were aware of it. They were just assured that it'd be taken care of. It just wasn't.
Right.
And now, and my fear is because Ashton Carter, the secretary, has come out and said, well, we're going to stop collecting the money. Well, he hasn't said we're going to absolve it.
And remember,
And that's why we as in California, the Governor's Military Council, which you know is a very influential group of people, a bunch of 3- and 4-star admirals and generals with Congressman Tashner, this is something we're going to ensure that we take care of our guard members.
but, so we know that the DOD is freezing the collection. But what about those that were bullied into paying back money because they were threatened with debt collectors calling them and they had to mortgage their house and they went into default and their credits destroyed?
You're exactly right. And there's a number of pots you could put him in. There's a person that you just described that had to pay money back and put his house up from mortgage or whatever. They need to be made whole.
Right.
There's the people that we're going to take the money that we're going to take care of. They need to be made whole.
Right.
And there's also the people who took the money at a higher rank that knew they shouldn't have taken the money, and they need to be held accountable. So this is a bowl of spaghetti that's going to take a while to unravel.
And I want to talk about the various noodles in it because you suggested that, there's a fundamental question here. We're activating reserve and guard because we don't have enough people. Dare I say, do we need to start looking at conscription? Do we need to start looking at more active recruitment?
Well, I think what the problem is that we have a war going on
Right.
that we've been committed to for some time. And as you know, we don't really pay for it. And as I've said a number of times when I was the undersecretary, we have people going to war, and the majority of the civilians are going to the mall, and they don't even know what's happening or care about it.
You got to come back. You got to come back. He is Rocky Chavez. He is a member of the California State Assembly, representing significant portions of San Diego County, where we are today. I'm Brad Pomerance. You're watching Local Edition.